Does the dollar sign have a struck S? Every currency has its unique mark or symbol by which we immediately recognize it. But why does the American dollar have a struck-through S when logically it should be the letter D? The origin of the dollar can be traced back to the Spanish peso. It was the pesos, specifically the silver coin known as the Spanish dollar, also called the piece of 8, that served as the model for the American currency. The American Congress defined this in the Coinage Act of 1792. Initially, the American dollar had no symbol, but one began to appear at the end of the 18th century. But where did it come from? There are several theories. One of them suggests that it was derived from a shorthand writing symbol for pesos, where the S began to be written over the P. Another theory proposes that it represents the Pillars of Hercules, the symbol of the Strait of Gibraltar, with a ribbon wrapped around them. There is also speculation that it could be the mint mark from Potosi, where much of the silver for the Spanish colonial empire was mined. What are dogs' black noses for? Whether they are dark, light, or spotted, dogs' noses are very often black as coal. Why is that? And is it a problem when this isn't always the case? Nature has likely equipped dogs with black noses to protect them from the sun at this sensitive spot. Other parts of their body are covered by fur, but the nose is still exposed. Generally, the darker the nose, the better it is protected from harmful UV rays. In history, a black nose was also considered a sign of nobility, and breeds with other types of noses were seen as inferior. Today, breeders no longer think this way. Some breeds, like the Hungarian Pointer, have noses the same color as their fur, while other dogs can have even light pink noses. Sometimes this happens with puppies, whose noses darken later, or with older dogs that lose pigment with age. If your pet's black nose turns pink, it could be a reaction to a change in the environment or a sign of illness. In any case, we should protect light-colored dog noses with dog sunscreen. Can mountains grow? When we look at mountains, they seem like they've always been there. Majestic, unmoving, lifeless. While everything around them changes, they have remained the same for millions of years. Or have they? At the beginning, there are two tectonic plates that collide. They push against each other, bend, and create irregularities, from which mountains form. How high will they eventually be? Several factors influence this, such as the effects of erosion or the composition of the material in the Earth's crust, whether the mountains will float or sink. The forces between the mountains and the underlying rock also often pull and create tension. And thanks to this, some mountains are still growing. The Himalayas, for example, grow by 1.5 to 5 centimeters every year. Is Alzheimer's disease contagious? One of the greatest fears of older adults might not immediately be thought of as an infectious disease. However, scientists have been suspecting for a few years that it might be different. In 2015, London neurologist John Colling made a somewhat frightening discovery. At that time, he was studying the bodies of people who succumbed to the insidious Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, caused by the administration of growth hormones from the brains of the deceased. Although the individuals he studied were only between 36 and 51 years old, Colling found lesions in their brain tissue typical of Alzheimer's disease, which normally affects people over 65. How is that possible? When the growth hormone was administered, it likely led to the transmission of proteins that accumulate in the brain during this condition. It seems that this currently incurable disease is contagious. However, there is no need to panic. Transmission can occur, for example, during surgery from surgical instruments, but not through regular contact with an infected person. Why is foam always white? Shampoos, shower gels, bath foams, liquid soaps, all of these products on the shelves of drugstores attract attention with their various colors. However, when you bring them home and start using them, there's a catch. The foam they create is always white. Why? Foam simply forms when a liquid meets a gas and they mix together. In this case, the gas is air in our bathroom, and the liquid is water with a cleaning product. This mixture disrupts the high surface tension of the liquid, altering its normal shape. It starts to form bubbles. There is obviously more gas in the mixture than liquid, which is why the foam in our bathtub keeps increasing as we stir the water, even though the amount of water stays the same. The walls of the bubbles are extremely thin, and the product in the water becomes so diluted that we can no longer see its original color. So, why is foam not colorless, but white? Here, light scattering and reflection come into play. Why do we sneeze from pepper? Maybe it needs a bit more seasoning, you think. But as you quickly reach for the pepper shaker and a bit of spice disperses around, you start sneezing. If the same thing happened with salt, nothing would likely occur. So, what makes pepper so special? The answer lies in the compound called piperine, which is the substance responsible for giving pepper its sharp taste and strong aroma. Chemically, it belongs to a group of alkaloids, nitrogen-containing compounds that can irritate nerve endings in our nose. When piperine comes into contact with the mucous membrane, it triggers the release of histamine, which causes the muscles to contract, leading to a sneeze. Why does this happen? Essentially, the body uses this reaction to expel the irritant. How many scents can the human nose detect? We can't compete with dogs when it comes to smelling. There's no doubt about that. They have about 40 times more olfactory cells, and their nose is said to be up to 1,000,000 times more sensitive than ours. However, we are not completely inferior to animals. Our nose has around 400 functional olfactory receptors, and it has long been believed that we can recognize up to 50,000 different smells and scents. However, in recent years, scientists have raised that number. According to new studies, it's now said to be closer to 1 trillion. While we can't count it exactly, it generally holds that we likely underestimate the human sense of smell. For example, researchers from the University of California, Berkeley, used experiments to demonstrate that humans can be just as good at tracking scents as dogs. They hid scent trails, such as chocolate or gasoline, in the grass, and volunteers with blindfolds, plugged ears, and thick gloves were asked to find their way by smell alone. Most of them succeeded. Although slower than dogs, they improved with training. Is it possible to cry underwater? A strong emotion is all it takes, and your eyes are wet with tears. But what happens if we experience the same emotion while submerged underwater? Do tears form? Instead of searching for the answer, you can try it out directly. But it will be difficult. Whether you're actually shedding tears underwater, you won't feel it much. The truth is, crying underwater is quite challenging. It's not about the tear ducts. They still work underwater and react basically the same way. The problem lies in the density of the water, which is greater than the density of air. The pressure from the heavy water on your eye will vigorously prevent the tear from escaping. The tear glands would need to exert an extraordinary amount of force, which they certainly don't need for regular spontaneous crying. Why are clear nights colder? Winter is approaching, and with it, long, cold nights. As is well known, the coldest nights are always those with a completely clear sky. But why is that when during the day, a clear sky makes it warmer? On Earth, two types of heat compete with each other. One comes from the sun, which warms our planet, and the other is radiated by the planet itself, just like all other bodies in the universe whose temperature is above absolute zero, 273.16 degrees Celsius. The radiation of heat from the Earth naturally cools it down. So, when no new heat is coming from the sun at night, the temperature gradually drops until morning. But why is it colder on a clear night than on a cloudy one? Simply put, dense clouds prevent heat radiation and thus cooling. More precisely, the clouds themselves also radiate heat, meaning every tiny particle in the clouds emits radiation, which then hits the Earth's surface. This way, the planet gets at least some of the lost heat back. What is the difference between red and white meat? Fish has white meat, cows have red meat, and chickens have both. What exactly causes the fact that every type of meat is a slightly different color? And what can we infer from these differences? When we buy beef wrapped in plastic at the store, it is usually accompanied by red liquid. It's not blood, it's water mixed with myoglobin. This protein gives the meat its reddish-brown color. It's no coincidence that it's similar to hemoglobin, which carries oxygen in the blood. Myoglobin serves as an oxygen reservoir in muscles. This means that the more oxygen a former muscle needed, the redder the meat is. Muscles that are used intensively consume more oxygen. These are often the muscles in the legs, which is why thigh meat on a chicken is darker than breast meat.